previous pastor had been removed after 8 months of being pastor there. He was removed and sent to treatment. So there was, so there were always this sort of, I knew what I was walking into. This was a really adverse situation. And what this parish needed at some level was a sense of continuity and someone who loved them. So I think what happened was folks didn't feel loved. They just felt like, well, we have another person here. They're going to go try their wings at this and go off to somewhere else. So what I also knew at the time, and it's true now, it's the diocese's largest predominantly African-American parish. So you have that distinction of the unique cultural aspect of that parish. The other thing is that it's on the border of Oakland and Berkeley, which gives you a sense of what you're dealing with culturally as well as politically. You also have a strong contingent of folks from the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley that were very present in that parish. So you had a group of, I guess I'd say, white liberal progressive types, and a group, very strong group of African Americans who tend to be arranged on a lot of different levels. So I knew this is what I was working with. And we were one of the only few parishes and dioceses that had a really unique way of doing liturgy, reflecting the African American population at St. Columba. So, oh, and Bishop Cummins, by the way, said, well, you're going to go there, and you're going to be the 7th guy in 5 years, and you're not going to live there. So, oh, really? Okay. Well, he goes, well, it's too dangerous to live there. And certainly too dangerous to live there by yourself. And so he asked me to live with the Oblates of Mary Immaculate community at Sacred Heart in Oakland on 40th and Martin Luther King, which isn't exactly a safer neighborhood. But at least I would be with about 5 other priests. And one of the other priests was Father Larry Silva, who is now the Bishop of Honolulu. He was in the room across from mine. He was pastoring St. Patrick's in West Oakland, and I was at St. Columba in Oakland. So yeah, we go from a real safe neighborhood or a real bad neighborhood to a worse neighborhood. But so what's going on? What do I have here? Let's see. Okay. So I knew what to expect demographically. I had a sense of what to expect fiscally when I arrived there. When I inherited the parish, they were taking special collections just to pay the PG&E bill. It was not unusual in my first few months there. In fact, I remember one occasion, I was at the PG&E office with my check, downtown Oakland. On the other end of the line was my secretary phoning me saying, the PG&E man here is here to cut off the electricity. And I'm standing in line with the check to PG&E. So I'm trying to, PG&E person, here's my check. You talk to the person at the other end, tell them don't shut off the electricity. So you have a sense of what that financially was about. We had a charter school that had not paid its rent in 6 months. So we had a deadbeat tenant that we had to deal with. My first day I walk in the office, I kid you not, the first day I walk into the office, the secretary is about to get into a fight with a groundsperson. The sacristan is holding the groundsperson back. The secretary is coming saying, come on, just come on, come on. That is what I walked into my first day at St. Columba. I tell that, I remember I tell that in my final mass at St. Columba. It's like, you know what, folks? You remember the day when, I told y'all when, the secretary and the groundskeeper were about to throw blows at each other. And that's what I walked into, literally walked into that. So I had a broke parish, and this is not to even think about what the neighborhood was like at the time, and still is. That was August 1999. I knew the parish needed to know that I was in there for the long haul. They needed consistent and stable leadership. I grew up in that area. There were people in that parish who knew me because their children and I went to school together at St. Mary's in Berkeley. And so I was not that unfamiliar face to a lot of those folks. And I went to schools with large African-American populations, so it was not unusual for me to work within an African-American context. So one of the things when you learn when you work in an African-American context and you're not black, you say to yourself, you know what? I'm not black. Now that sounds like an obvious thing, but and I think, I looked at Father Jerry Moran, he knows what I'm talking about. There was one priest, I think, who went there who thought he was black, and he wasn't, he was white. And so when you think you're black, and you think you can say things that you shouldn't be saying. Like N-word in public, stuff like that, right? So one thing I told consciously in my own heart, I'm not black, and I'm not going to try to be black. I grew up in a black neighborhood. You know, I can speak Ebonics with the best of them, but I'm not black. So lesson number one, I have much to learn about the culture. I have to be humbled and listen to the elders in that community and to respect the culture to which they are from. I bring my own gifts, and those gifts I share, but for me to be comfortable with who I am in that setting, has to first realize I'm not African American. 2, be Christ to everybody. And that means everybody. There were people in that neighborhood who it was very difficult for me to be Christ to and with, or very difficult for me to even recognize Christ's presence in them. Tammy was a homeless woman, a prostitute, who lived in an abandoned truck right around the corner from the parish. It was every time she'd ask for money or food, it was a real difficulty for me to be able to try to see Christ in her, though I knew Christ was there. That didn't mean she got money or food at every time she asked me, but I had to remind myself, this person is Christ here in that midst. I have to be reminded of the Christ I would see at Christmas and at Thanksgiving, folks who we would give baskets to, through the generosity of our St. Vincent de Paul. I see Lou here from St. Vincent de Paul from Alameda County. Now, it's difficult sometimes because we had gift baskets and food, and people would pick them up, and they would pick them up in a Lexus, or they would pick it up in a Mercedes, right? And I'm sitting there thinking, you know, my car barely runs. And I'm sitting there thinking, driving a Lexus 4, picking up a turkey. What's that all about? You know? And of course, and I tell my St. Vincent de Paul people, we all kind of laugh at each other and say, hey, well, you know, Bobby, you know, yeah, I know, but you know, just ain't right. Not fair. Why are you driving a Lexus? I'm driving a junk car. This ain't right. So, but it was that sense of being able to struggle to see Christ, even in those kinds of settings, that, hey, you know, if I had monthly Lexus payments, I'd be broke too, I suppose. The other, all right, unfiltered stuff. Okay, one of the other rules I said to my janitorial staff, to my cleaning staff was this: I pick up the dirty stuff. I pick up the dirty stuff. I mean, I'm not just talking, I mean, I pick up all the dirty stuff. And on a Sunday morning, in a place where there's a lot of homeless folks, in a neighborhood that I was pastor for 10 years, I made it clear to my staff, I will do that. Because I wanted my staff to know that I'm not above doing anything. You know, that, you know, I'm not too good to not have to pick up after somebody their calling card in the morning. 2, it enabled me to be very humble, because I said, you know, if I think I struggled in my own life, at least I've got a place to go. You know, and here was somebody who had no place to go, literally had no place to go. So that was a rule I set for my staff. I said, I'll clean up whatever it is. If it's fecal matter, if it's used condoms or needles, I'll take care of that. Obviously, I'll wash my hands, okay, folks? I mean, we'll take care of that. But